If you're certain you're about to get hit, there are a few options to defend yourself with. When on the ground, you'll have block high and block low. Against the majority of attacks, you must use block high, but some attacks will hit low and require block low instead. Use your predictions to check which block will defend against which attacks. While in the air, you'll just have block, which behaves as both block high and low as it defends against all blockable attacks. However, all blocks will fail against grab or other attacks with grab properties. When you've blocked an attack or projectile within 10 frames, you enter a block state, during which you'll take dramatically reduced damage from attacks, often called chip damage, a little knockback, and you will ignore the hit stop and hit stun those attacks would normally apply. You will automatically block all blockable attacks, low or otherwise, and both you and your opponent will gain super meter for each one. It is possible to be grabbed before you can act again, but the circumstances are highly specific. You will leave the block state to become actionable again once your opponent becomes actionable, or once 20 frames have passed since you started the block, whichever happens first. When starting a block, the first 10 frames will protect you, but if nothing hits you, 9 recovery frames will follow, and some attacks are slow enough to hit later than 10 frames. If you block at the wrong time, you'll spend 19 frames doing nothing, so take caution. Blocking can ironically leave yourself open to attack. But what if you block at the perfect time? You parry. When you parry, you take no damage or knockback, and instead of entering a block state, you become actionable in that same frame. You will gain more meter than normal blocking, which varies based on what you parried, and your opponent won't receive meter at all. Your opponent will be stuck in recovery frames, potentially leaving them vulnerable to your own attack. Parrying causes a unique visual effect, so if you want to see if blocking can lead to a parry, look for it in the predictions. To parry a projectile, you must block within 3 frames from when it would hit you. To parry a melee attack, you must begin a block on the same frame or earlier than your opponent's attack began. If you and your opponent are both actionable and they use an attack that hits within 10 frames and you block, you will parry the attack. However, if they use an attack that hits you later than 10 frames, you will be hit instead. If you want a less committal defense, you can dodge instead. Usable on the ground or in the air, dodge has a 2-frame startup that is invulnerable to projectiles and grabs, then invulnerability to everything for 8 frames. This ends in 5 frames of recovery. While blocking is vulnerable to grabs and requires you use the correct block on the ground, dodge doesn't have these problems. Sometimes parrying a projectile isn't possible within 3 frames, and blocking will incur some damage and meter gain for the opponent. Dodging that projectile will solve those problems, though you won't gain meter for it. It also makes you move a set distance either left or right, which can help manage your distance to your opponent. It will remove your collision, meaning that during its frames you can pass through your opponent, which can be useful if you want to trade sides. While this movement can certainly be helpful, it might leave you too far to attack. While a parry makes you immediately actionable and the block state makes you actionable when your opponent is, dodge roll, even when timed well, requires you wade through its recovery frames, which can lead to you being left vulnerable. Like blocking and parrying, dodge shares a weakness for slow attacks that hit once dodge's invulnerability wears off. However, the movement can potentially push you out of the range of those attacks, and even when it won't, your opponent must still predict which direction you're going. While blocking and dodging are the primary defensive options, remember that there are other alternatives like movement and actions with special properties. Remember that sometimes the best route to your offense starts with a strong defense.